Christian Parenting.
Understanding our own finances is hard enough, let alone knowing how to teach our children. The Family and Finances podcast hopes to take you from a place of stress, worry, and tension to a place of freedom, peace, and unity. If you're looking for peace of mind, contentment, and confidence in dealing with your finances, this is the podcast for you. Well, welcome back, Ann. Today we're going to talk about all things involving real estate.
And we loved real estate.
We have. Both of us have enjoyed it. I was just thinking before we got started, we've owned 6 homes in our life. So I would say we could call this real estate the good, the bad, and the ugly. We've made a lot of mistakes, but some of it has worked out really well.
And we've built, we've bought almost new, and we've remodeled.
Yeah, we've done just about all of it. When I think about real estate for couples, I think it's the biggest financial decision that we make as a married couple, typically. I mean, with very few exceptions, it's the biggest purchasing decision we make together. And so it's either going to be one of the best financial decisions we've made or potentially one of the worst. And through our years of counseling couples and helping people try to make good real estate decisions, we've seen both sides of that spectrum. Even now, you know, when there's sort of a real estate fever, we've seen couples get in a big hurry and make mistakes, particularly on things like the inspection. And remember, we had a couple call us that their inspection was all good. They moved in, and it was a fraud.
Right.
Someone had paid an inspector to deceive them. And so they bought a money pit, a nightmare. So let's start with being prepared to buy a home, just in terms of your relationship, because things change when you become a homeowner. You're this happy-go-lucky couple in the honeymoon phase. You're probably renting your favorite apartment. It's all cute, and there's no pressure. You can lock and leave and travel. And now somebody in the marriage wants to buy something. And I think it's important to be united on that decision.
Absolutely, because owning a home brings whole new responsibility. If you have a yard, you've got to have one of you's got to take care of the yard, and you've got to pay to have somebody take care of it for you. There's maintenance issues that you're responsible for. You've got neighbors to deal with, and you know, it goes on and on. Yeah,
we had a couple in just recently. I talked to them, and they didn't come in to see you at that time, but they had their furniture removed forcibly by their landlord, you know, by the mortgage holder, and sat on their front yard when they got home from work one day. And the husband had not told his wife that he was behind on the payments. So
surprise!
It was a disaster.
Wow.
We put her in charge of making the mortgage payments after that. But the main thing is to be united, to be sure that you're prepared for the responsibility, that you've evaluated things like job security, motivation. Why do you want to be? Because in some ways, you're giving up a little bit of freedom. I've known couples who've bought a house and they couldn't ever sell it. And they couldn't move when their job situation changed. And so they got into a real bind just by being homeowners. So there's some freedom in the stage of life where you may rent by choice. And that's happening more and more and more. People say to me all the time, well, I'm just throwing my money away if I'm renting. I always say, no, you're getting a place to live. And there's a benefit to that. It's not like you're just getting nothing in return for that.
People also have to have adequate emergency savings because, you know, there are things that happen in a home that have to be taken care of immediately.
Well, on the financial side, I would say at least 3 months in emergency savings before you become a homeowner. You don't have to have that in an apartment because if the refrigerator, you know, breaks down or the hot water heater goes out, they fix it. Now you're going to have to fix it. So you need emergency savings. I believe you have to have a sufficient down payment. We'll talk about some of the financing choices later, but you also need money set aside for the cost of buying a house, which is your closing cost, your moving cost, your new furnishings, you know, all the little fix-up you want to do. They say the national average right now is $10,000 your first year of home ownership that people spend just to get it the way they want their house to be.
I thought it might be more than that. You
Well,
left out landscaping.
yeah, that's your passion. You want to be sure the drive up appeal is great. In our first house, we bought a home that had been destroyed by a tornado, and we built together our first house, and that was a test of our marriage, don't you think?
Well, it was small. We bought a slab, and we learned learned a lot
Well,
from that.
we agreed after that we would never try to put up wallpaper together.
That's for sure. Yeah.
You want to tell people what happened?
Well, I'm sure you'd like me to.
I would.
Yeah, I mismeasured, and you tried to tell me I was wrong, and I discovered that I was after I'd already cut it.
After it was too late.
Yeah.
You can't put that wallpaper back together. But we learned a lot, and we grew together through that experience, and we made money on that house. That was a good investment for us. We haven't made money on all the houses that we bought in our life. And from that, we've learned how to get much better at it. And I hope today people learn from some of the mistakes we made so they can benefit on their house. Let me just transition to how to buy a house. I believe the first most important thing is to be slow. Never get in a hurry. Sometimes we fall in love with a house. We emotionally buy it. I used to work in real estate, as you know, Ann, and I would watch people emotionally buy a house, and I couldn't talk them out of it once they made that decision. And when they emotionally buy it, I could tell they were walking around measuring. They were placing furniture. They were imagining where their dog would be or where the cars or the bicycles would go. And you just knew it was all over, and they couldn't be talked out of it. And that's a dangerous place to be. So for you and I, we've always said we'll never get in a hurry on a real estate decision.
No, we learned to know your market really well. We always try to buy the least expensive or the lower cost home in a neighborhood.
That's one of our rules of thumb. We look for the lowest cost home in a good neighborhood.
Right.
So that we never want to be the highest price. And the idea there is that we would have the most marketability when it was time to sell.
Well, we also had leeway to upgrade.
To improve the value of that home and hopefully get the benefit of that. We always want to choose a great location. That starts, at least in America, with what's the school district, because that impacts people's finances. If they can't put the children in that school, they have to either homeschool or pay for a private school.
Right. And you've got to consider transportation costs.
Yeah. How close is it to your work?
Right.
What's the crime rate in the area? What's the history of crime? Today, people are checking these websites that reveal if there's any people with federal offenses in your neighborhood so that you know before you move in. You and I always drive around and meet the neighbors.
Yes.
Every time.
That's best information.
Yeah, we ask them how they like it, if everybody gets along, any problems, and they'll tell you.
Yeah, we learn about homeowners associations and
we also study the history of the resale in that area. And I think, look, here's one of my best rules of thumb. Buy a home that other people want to buy. People sometimes look for a home that's been on the market a long time thinking they're going to get a great deal. Usually they're not, because nobody wants to buy the house.
Yeah.
Now, if it's been in foreclosure, that will mean one of two things. Either somebody bought it and got in financial trouble and they couldn't pay their mortgage and now the home's back on the market, or, which is most often the case, there's a problem with the house and nobody else wants it. It's either a water problem or a power line problem or mold or something that prevents other people from buying it, and that's why it goes into foreclosure. So we are very careful to do the inspections and to be sure that it's a home that somebody else would want to buy from us. And I think that's helped us start to do much better on our decisions. When we just look for a cheap house or a deal, you can get into trouble. I think also on this principle of never buying a problem, if you buy a house that has a problem that you can't fix, then it will be your problem after you buy it. We had a friend that bought a house that I'd say sat down in a hole, and water ran down towards their house, and they had to try to they were going to fix it, right? Well, it didn't really get fixed. Still, there was a perception that water was going to run down into that house, and they lost money after they fixed it up because that problem didn't really go away.
Right.
If it's on a busy street, you're not going to probably change the traffic flow.
No.
And if you got high power wires above you, people are concerned about their health now, and so we wouldn't ever do anything like that.
Another thing we like to take into consideration is it a home where we can have people in? Can we exercise hospitality easily? Is there good parking? Is there good space to entertain people? Is the possibility to have an extra room or, sleeper sofa somewhere?
Yeah. Is the floor plan segmented where we could bring somebody in if we needed to, even like a member of our family? We've been looking at options now. If we turn into the sandwich generation where your mother or my father could live with us. And so we're set up for that, and we anticipated that. I think where people make the biggest mistakes is when they actually buy the house, how they buy the house, how they structure their financing. I don't know if you remember, Ann, we tried to buy a house in the 80s. We went into the savings and loan. We applied for a loan, and the mortgage rate was 18%.
We didn't know any different, so.
We were young, and we thought, well, I guess people pay 18%. Today, that was historically the highest. Today, it's historically the lowest. But I remember that lender said to me, you will never see fixed-rate mortgages return in America. That was in the 80s. He was so sure of himself. So he said, you have to get an adjustable rate mortgage. And that meant, it stayed, less than 18%. What do we have? 12% for 5 years, and then they could adjust it up or down, which is really a terrible way to finance a house because we look at it as a long-term decision that we never would buy a house if we didn't think we would be there at least 5 years. Right. Because there's just too many friction costs, moving in, moving out, getting set up, a little fix up, and there's not enough opportunity for it to appreciate. And so having that kind of financing was a bad idea. So our process has always been 20% down. We want to put 20% down of the purchase price, and that avoids private mortgage insurance, PMI. And PMI is when the lender says, I'm not sure you're qualified, so I'm going to charge you a premium, not necessarily on your rate, but on this insurance that if you default, then the loan will be covered. And if we ever had to have PMI, we would just say, we're not going to buy it.
Right. Well, a lot of people are refinancing right now because the rates are so low.
Well, when it comes to refinancing, our rule of thumb has been if you can't save at least 1 full percentage point on your mortgage, we don't do it. Because there's two things that people forget about refinancing. Your time to pay off your mortgage resets. So when you get 10 years into a mortgage, let's say, suddenly you're paying a lot more towards your principal than you are interest. When you refinance, it goes back the other direction. Suddenly you're paying a lot more towards interest instead of principal. And so your long-term cost will not be that much improved unless you drop a significant percentage in your mortgage rate and in the rate that you're,
and the length of time.
And the length of time.
Going from a 30 to a 15-year note.
That means for many people, their payment is going to go up, but their long-term cost of owning it will go down. So what we've always done is we've gone for the standard 30-year fixed payment, and then which gives us the lowest payment and the most flexibility, and then tried to pay it off with increased payments, each year or a little more each month, and tried to get ahead of that. And then just recently, because rates had dropped so much, then we were able to refinance. And I think we cut our mortgage rate in half. And the amount of time and the amount of interest we're saving and how soon we'll have it paid off.
Right.
And so the goal is to buy a home you can afford now. Let's talk about percentages, Ann, because the standard lender will say you can borrow up to 40% of your annual income to move into a house. And what many people do is they say, oh, well, then my payment can be 40%. That's not what that means. That means that your total cost of home ownership should be no more than 40%.
Yeah.
That's taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities. All of that has to be included. Now, if all of that is under 40, you're safe. But we like to advise couples, why not try to do 30? Yeah, I remember the research you did on super savers.
Oh, yes. They go way below the
Intentionally.
average. Mm-hmm.
Because this is typically the biggest expense in our budget.
Mm-hmm.
And so the super savers say, well, if the world's doing 40%, I'm going to do 20. And they will live way below their means so that margin is built into their budget.
Well, the stress of being house poor is horrendous. For me, I just hated it. We've been there before.
I was going to say, you want to describe that?
It's awful.
Well, house poor means you have more house than you can afford to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And you've bitten off this mortgage that you're stuck with. And we've been stuck with that. And, the two things that happened in that house, Ann, we were so excited to move in. We put money into it that did not improve its value. We just did what we wanted to do to it. We put the kind of carpet, paint, everything in it we liked. And we thought, man, that's going to do it. And what we realized, it added no value at all to that house. And then because we were under pressure, we had to sell it. And we had to sell it for less than what we wanted for it. So we lost money practically in every way on that house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when we realized never again we want to live like that and get into that kind of financial bind.
Chuck, we've received questions from listeners, and one of those is, how quickly should we try to pay off our house?
Some of that's a little bit of your own personal preference and how you and your spouse might decide what that priority is in your life. I think it's a good thing to aspire to, but it's not necessarily essential to make that your top financial priority. In many ways, this is a good time to lock into a long-term interest rate at a very low cost and do other things with your money. I don't think it's a good idea to look at your house as your primary investment vehicle. We've talked about that, Ann. It's a place to live. It's a place to call home. It's a place for a husband and wife to express their gifts and talents. We had a friend whose home burned down. And I remember they knew that God owned it all and they were good stewards, but I remember how painful it was. And what they said standing outside that home after it had burned down is that a piece of themselves was expressed, a piece of their creativity, their heart, their memories that was expressed in their own home, and it was gone. And so it was extremely painful for them to lose the place where they'd been living. So consider it your home. Consider it a place where God's given you a foundation to operate from and to serve other people from. But I don't like looking at it as a place to just pump money into to try to make a big return on the money. You may or you may not. The main thing is not to get into trouble in the decision you've made and how you've chosen to finance the house.
Let's assume we move into an inflationary time. How will that affect housing and payments?
We're in that time right now, and with 0% interest rate coming from the Fed, that means that mortgage rates are at a historic low. And what people don't realize is that prices are going up as a result of it. And so I'm going to say this, it's going to sound controversial, but in an inflationary period, debt is good. So you buy something with debt and it's going to go up because the cost of money is so low. However, where the danger comes in is in a deflationary period. If you've borrowed a lot of money and your price of your house goes down, that's called getting upside down on your mortgage. It's called getting, in red ink, it's called getting near foreclosure. And we saw that in the crisis of 08 and 09. People were flooding us with calls of, there was the so-called mailbox walkaway, where they would put the keys in the mailbox and tell the lender, come and get it, we'll never pay it off. And so we don't know if we're going to stay in inflation or go into deflation. So you have to be very, very careful and just be really wise. You and I believe that it's good to make it a priority to have everything paid for. We have no debt except a mortgage, but we have an appreciating asset. And so we're not in a super hurry to get it paid off.
Okay. Great answer. Should I buy
Thank you.
a fixer-upper,
Thank you.
a move-in ready home, or a brand new one?
It depends on what your gifts and talents are. A fixer-upper can be overwhelming to people. We have a child that likes to buy fixer-uppers, and they have done extremely well. And in fact, they kind of look at it like an investment opportunity as a young couple because they're talented and they've made money doing that. The fixer-upper has to be a known opportunity because if you buy somebody else's problem and don't know how to fix it, then you will lose money. But if you know in advance that you can fix it, it's a good move. We've got friends, and speaking of fixer-upper, you and I went to college in Waco. So we know Waco well. We've never met Chip and Joanna, but they've made Waco the most searched city in America on these real estate search engines.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of our friends who live there decided they would do a fixer-upper. And we were talking to them the other day, and they've bought and sold, I think, 8 houses in Waco. A lot of risk, a lot of money involved, a lot of time and energy. And in the 8 houses, they've profited $80,000 total, $10,000 a house average. And they've lost money on some of them. And they said it is not easy at all to flip houses. And so they really put out a warning. You would think in the Waco market it would be so easy, but it hadn't been easy. So if you're capable to buy a fixer-upper, new homes, that's a different decision than just a move-in ready home. A new home is typically going to be priced into that, the maximum value. The builder knows that you're willing to pay top dollar. So you have to be careful to know that it's going to appreciate. And sometimes in a new subdivision or a new area, there's a little bit of risk in that. I've personally, and you and I personally, always wanted to buy a used home more move-in ready. That's just been our preference.
Well, because we would know the neighborhood and had the opportunity to meet neighbors ahead of time.
Yeah. But if you buy in a great neighborhood and that builds out well and all the lots are sold and it's going to appreciate and do very well for you. I don't think we've ever bought a new home.
No, I guess we haven't. Well, what financial state should we be in before investing in real estate?
A very good one. When I say that, I think we talked about that earlier. You need to be in a good place relationally because of the stress it will put on your family. And you need to be in a good place financially so that the house doesn't become the center of your universe. It can start to consume all of your time, all of your energy, all of your resources. And we would say, look, the 20% down payment, no PMI, no adjustable rate mortgage, and at least $10,000 in the bank going into it so you can fix it up without going into debt.
And I should have been more clear. When I say investing, I mean, I'm thinking flips.
Oh, okay. What condition should you be in before you flip a house? Well, when you
flips,
get it,
all right, let me say this. Flips or rentals?
Yeah, buying to basically want to get into real estate as your side
Investment,
gig. Yeah. Well, my father did that. My father at one time owned 30 houses, and he was a professional accountant and very good with numbers, very good administrator and manager. And I asked him just recently, Dad, you've sold all of your rental houses. Would you do that again? And he said, never. And I said, why? I thought you did so well. At one point they were worth millions of dollars. And he said, I think I ended up spending more time and agony and stress and frustration than it was worth. People abused the houses. They tore them up. He wasn't in a market segment that people respected the homes. He bought in a way that he thought he could make the most value flipping, and it didn't work at all.
No, I remember one renter didn't put a shower curtain up.
The whole time.
And
the shower fell through the floor.
It was awful.
Yeah, and then they move out and, they have a $1,000 deposit and you've got a $10,000 repair. So I learned a lot watching Dad do that. It's popular right now. You nearly need to be strong financially. I would say, you probably don't ever need to have two mortgages. So if you're going to buy a rental property to flip, you either need to pay for that one in cash or have your primary home paid for in cash.
Hmm.
Because two mortgages at the same time will consume a lot of your credit availability, and you're at great risk. We've become much more cautious. And so if I were going to flip houses, I would only buy something I could pay for in cash to flip and fix up with cash. And that's a high bar to set, but at least you wouldn't get in trouble if it goes backwards on you.
Okay. What about if you have other things you could sell to cover the house?
Yeah, well, if you've got other assets to cover it.
Yeah, liquid things. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. When you said cash, I just wanted to verify
Now,
that.
I'm just saying, don't go into debt to try to flip houses.
Right.
Some people say, well, I've got 50% down. That may work. But look, we've got friends right here where we live who've told us they have been hurt really bad trying to flip houses.
Okay. So what home features are worth investing in for resale?
Do the research. You and I didn't do the research, and so we would just fix a home the way we wanted it, oblivious to the fact that you have to be thinking about resale. In today's world, people can look at 1,000 houses on a weekend online, and they will just rule them out if they don't look a certain way. So you may think, well, I'm going to paint this house the colors I want. And so you may paint the kids' bedroom purple and, a study red and all the things you like, but that doesn't help your resale. So you have to study what people want in the market today. Obviously, they want good kitchens. Most of that is money that you will not only get back, but possibly make money on. They want living space, like really good master bathrooms, good closet space, good storage space. One of the things that we did, Anne, is we made improvements to a house without improving the square footage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got our cost per square foot higher than the market would bear. And that's a really important factor. Today, you can know the average resale cost per square foot and then back into those improvement decisions. Take, for instance, a swimming pool. Most experts will tell you a swimming pool does not help with your value of your home. It may help the resale value, but you usually don't get your money back out of what you pay on a pool. So be very careful on that.
And I've read that there are some basics that all buyers expect. They want a good roof. They expect a well-working HVAC system, those kind of things. So you've got to leave room to make repairs.
The
siding,
maintenance to keep the home up. That's been our strategy, is try to keep the home in very nice condition and be somewhat neutral about the things that we do to improve it so that somebody else might like that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's all transitory. Very few people live in the same place today for 30 or 40 or 50 years. And so you have to be thinking ahead and watch your costs very carefully.
So Chuck, why don't you just review some of the basic advice? Can you sum it up for us?
Yeah. In summary, it's the biggest purchase you're going to make in your life, so be slow. Never get in a hurry. There's real estate fever right now. There's fewer homes on the market in the United States today than in 1982. So that means this low interest rate has caused people to make the decision to buy. So there's not a great inventory selection, and prices are going up. So even though costs are low, prices are higher, and inventory is low. So be very, very careful. Don't buy anything unless you're in absolute agreement with your spouse that this is a good time emotionally, that you're both ready for it, and that you prepared financially. If you've done those things, then it can be an absolute joy and something that God rewards you with. You've exercised wisdom in how you've made this purchase, and think about giving it time to appreciate, so that after you've lived there for 5 to 7 years, whatever the average is today, that it's gone up in value, and that will accumulate equity, and that will allow you to the next home pay more down for, the next home, and the next home, and eventually you will actually be able to be in a home without having any debt on it.
A lot of people assume that home ownership is the American dream. Do you agree?
I don't agree with that, Ann. It is the thing that has helped Americans have more wealth than most of the rest of the world. because we accumulate assets in our home. And as long as those values keep appreciating, it's very helpful to us. But that's not the American dream. In fact, there's a parable of the farmer in the scripture who had a barn that was nice and he wanted a bigger barn. And he stated that, hey, I'll tear this down and get a bigger one so that I can eat, drink, and be merry. And I think he was sort of expressing the idea of the American dream. And the Lord said, well, today you die, you lose all of that. So we don't ever want to get caught up in it. It's temporal. Our eternal home is more important. I like to see people put God's kingdom first and make giving their highest priority, live beneath their means. You remind me of a story that I need to tell. But to be a good steward and not get caught up in where you live, what it looks like, and place too much emphasis on that.
Yeah, it's easy to put our identity in our homes.
It is.
And that's not where it should be.
Yeah, it's very easy. You want it to reflect your values. I think modesty and humility are so important.
Chuck, do you remember the home we visited in Dallas about 20 years ago?
Well, how vividly I remember that, Ann. I haven't told that story in a long time, but we had just joined staff with Crown. We were responsible for raising our own support. We had 4 children, and we felt very poor and vulnerable. And we were invited to go to a dinner at a home. We pulled up, and they had valet parking. We went in the house, and I think it was the biggest we'd ever been in our lives.
Mm-hmm. It may still be.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe 20,000 square feet, 5 or 6 acres in town. It had a bowling alley, a baseball field. It had a 3-story library rotunda with the ladders going up. I mean, rare paintings. It was what I described as jaw-dropping.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we left the party. There were only about 20 couples there. They had the valet come and bring our dirty little used car pulled up there. And we got in our used car, and I thought, oh my goodness, we felt so poor after being in there. And I thought you were going to talk to me about, did we make the right decision in going into ministry and not ever being able to have something like that? And so I said to you, what do you think, Ann? Do you remember what you said to me?
No, I don't remember exactly.
You said, if man can build a house like that, imagine what the mansions in heaven are going to be like.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at you and I thought, thank you. I don't feel any pressure at all. I don't feel pressure to get my mansion on earth. You weren't overly impressed. It was a beautiful home, but we didn't have to have it to feel good about ourselves.
No, we can appreciate beauty. God created things with beauty, but we have to keep an eternal perspective.
Yeah. And so I'm much more interested in that mansion to come than I am the one we might temporarily possess on earth.
Yes.
Thank you, Ann. I hope this has helped people. Thanks for bringing in some of those questions today.
It's been fun. Thanks.